Hello, doing my check-in with the final bit of Superior, The Return of Race Science by Angela Saini. At which point some dog barks somewhere and the dogs go into high alert. But I think we're just getting looking at versus full freak out. So I listened to the final bit of it, which kind of has to do with how medical science today um, still uses racial categories to stuff like for policy decisions on who to test for sickle cell anemia, who in the marketing of drugs, where for business decision they decided that we're going to only uh, they were rushing to test a drug, and to make it a quicker thing they said, okay, we're going to only it's only going to get approved for black people, and thus got pushed through more quickly, and is for black people, even though the scientist who came up with the drug says, like, oh no, it works for everybody. It's just that was a business decision. So um just all these areas, sure no one's coming in the backyard. um all these areas where scientists make racial distinctions about health, and kind of physical stuff, even though any biologist here, let me just check around the corner, even though any biologist would say the race, reputable, not pseudoscience hack, would say race isn't actually a factor in differentiating groups. There's far more variation within groups. I and some one of my neighbors around here have a far larger, difference in our biology than, particularly when it comes down to a racial thing of me comparing me with somebody who was born in China, for example. So that is interesting, and just a lot of the stuff that stuff that gets conflated with race, um, stuff like diet, stuff like upbringing, stuff like just general history is not a race thing, is not a biological thing. It's a cultural, social thing. My health outcome probably has far more to do with my income than it does to do with my race. But it's still getting used as a shorthand, and makes the point of, like, well, what does black mean? Like, in the United States, what does black mean? Because that covers a huge swath of people of a variety of different backgrounds, and how can you put that into what is actually a meaningful group? um, and that the fact that scientists in that are also interested in finding differences, um, unfortunately, is one of these things that just leads down a path. There, a relocation so that somebody can keep me company. Somebody's can keep me company while I'm finishing up this. God damn it! I'm trying to have a serious discussion here, guys. Not really. I'm just trying to get my thoughts straight on this book. Um, but yeah, this idea, so that scientists are kind of looking for differences, and that's unfortunately is going to lead down a path where people go, like, I am different from this person who is from somewhere else, and thus they're less intelligent than me, and they're going to be less, it's going to be, or they're more prone to violence, or something, and this is why we should keep them out of us and keep our racial purity, all this kind of fucking horrible stuff. It's using this stuff loosely, using this stuff sloppily, using this stuff. It's old racial categories that people I don't think myself included, you just sort of, you take it as for granted that when they talk about a study of like um, sickle cell anemia and stuff like that, where yes, there's a much higher prevalence of sickle cell anemia in people of black ancestry, of African ancestry. Uh, but if you look at that in the United States, there is far more white people in the United States. So even though there's a lower prevalence, um, that doesn't mean we should actually not test white people for sickle cell anemia. It's using these categories, and this is also, Sandy makes the point of, well, you know what what constitutes black, of it's one drop of blood is the racist thing for it, or anyone who appears black. But there's plenty of people who in the United States who have black ancestry who don't appear black. There are plenty of black people in the United States who have European ancestry in their past. This whole, that it's, you're either one or the other is a racist nonsense. It's using black and white categories where they don't apply to human beings. Human beings are far more complicated than that. And going into, I think I mentioned in the last one about all the genetics, and that there isn't a simple one-to-one of, oh, if I do this gene, it's going to make me more intelligent. It's like, that seems to be something that has to do with many, like thousands and thousands of genes interacting with our environment, our upbringing, our diet, all these other things that are involved. It's not simple, and the people who are looking for simple answers are often looking for simple answers to just confirm their own prejudice. So Sandy ends off the book saying, like, well, people are always, they're moving from one thing to the next. Whether it's the size of your cranium, the IQ, genes, they're always looking for something to make them seem we're different, we're superior, we're the best, and they'll continue looking for that. But she looks forward to a day when you'll run out of that. Like, intellectually, it's a doomed thing to do, a doomed process. You're never going to find that, no matter how much you twist the numbers, no matter how many nooks and crannies you look into, you're never going to find that. It's never actually going to be there. So that looks forward to a day when it's all dried up and people have nowhere to go to look for stuff, which I think is very optimistic. It's one of those things that people seem to have a limitless capacity to tell themselves stories, for good and for ill, and a limitless capacity to fool themselves, as evidenced by, we're definitely in the upswing at the moment. This is the return of race science. It's like, did it ever go away? It just seems like we have all these kind of peaks and valleys, and it's probably just the duty of everybody else who is a citizen to be aware of the history of stuff like race science, to be aware of a lot of the traps that even really well-meaning people can fall into, and things that just become accepted knowledge. You gotta have your thinking cap on at all times, and understand that you're probably going to fall into it. But that if anyone ever is saying, we're special, we're a special group, you belong, you're great, you're one of us, it's like, don't trust that person. They're doing it for their own aims. They're selling you something, and they're selling you something so that they can profit from it. So yeah. It was definitely an avalanche of information, which I'm still processing. And if I do actually do a more proper review of it, I'll probably try and just listen to the header of each of each chapter and try and break it down, uh, and then kind of synthesize it into something that's a little bit of a shorter talk about the book. But it's definitely a worthy book to talk about, because it's a lot of the crap science which has definite swings where it is the accepted knowledge, um, and it can be that way again. You know, we have a lot of people who aren't really scientists who are pushing forward this as accepted fact at the moment, and if we're not careful, those people, a lot of them are in power in places already, which is pretty scary. All right, this is definitely a Trump book, I guess, is a thing to say. This is a book that Trump, Brexit, this comes out of that kind of context. You know, this is someone who's, you know, the author talks about her son. I think it's her son, her child being born during, you know, Barack Obama's term in office, and, you know, having kind of a hope, and then that kind of dashing, and you can tell that this is a book that comes out of like, oh God, aside for kind of reason and racial equality, and you know, the are we all one people is not there at the moment, and this is a reaction book to that, which, you know, makes it a tough read, but a necessary read. All right, I will leave it there. I've been Jay. More videos later.